We begin the second side of Leisure with There's No Other Way. The second single off the album, this song has a very explicit, baggy, Manchester kind of feeling to the song, with its guitar vibes and a bit of an organ and tambourines to it. It almost kind of feels reminiscent of the old '60s beat rock kind of songs, or something psychedelic like "See Emily Play" by Pink Floyd. This song deals with the kind of boredoms and idealisms of the middle class bourgeois families, as Damon would probably put it, commenting how they kind of take the fun out of everything. They make people run when they don't want to think, as if they don't want to deal with the harshness of reality. They just want to sit down and just kind of turn off their brains and just enjoy life and all its good stuff as they last, really. Damon has a bit of a snarky, kind of rebellious tone to his voice, while at the same time kind of commenting on the ideas of teenage rebellion and all that, which is something I think is a kind of recurring theme to the album as a whole, or at least certain songs of it. And in terms of music, Graham Coxon's guitar does take the spotlight when it's in that solo. It's probably not the best solo of all time. It's probably not one to ride home for, but if you enjoy it and sit back and relax and listen to it, you'd enjoy it fine. You can tell he's enjoying it, even if he did back then and not nowadays. You can tell they did put some effort into another good and simple song like this. It's no wonder why this song in particular became another single. It's simple, it's catchy, and it just spells teenage nostalgia and kind of snarky rebellion and all that. It's almost kind of a bit like a proto Nirvana, I guess, but not as grungy as that kind of band. Next is
Stronger
Fool.
than flesh.
And no, you won't have to pay this Fool, Mr. T, because this song is probably one of the heaviest of the Blur songs, let alone of this early album.
From behind
it has this kind
these
of thick,
eyes
grungy,
of mine,
new wavy kind of feeling to it. Almost a bit like a throwback to some of the new wave post-punk albums like The Cure or Susie and the Banshees. And even some of the lyrics seem to show that kind of feeling of ignorance and pessimism and cynicism, with Damon kind of singing as if he was in a bit of an argument and now he's trying to shut himself off from this argument, trying to just kind of ignore it and just kind of carry on and move on with his life. And how the things he keeps hearing, they don't really make sense to him, as if he's not really putting one and one together, or two and two together, or three and three together, I don't know. But regardless, it's another song that kind of delves into the deconstruction of the everyday English family life. How parents and children kind of live these truly boring and rhythmic materialistic lives, and these parents who you think are just squeaky clean perfect may not be that much perfect at all. They can easily get into fights. So can with their children. Their children can get into fights, sometimes within themselves, between themselves, or even between each other. And once again, we have another good rendition of Coxon's guitars, and even some of the chaotic and clutteriness of the drums and the percussion. It kind of helps emphasize that feeling of anxiety and worry and this pressure that kind of comes from just this mentality, just this almost dark, but not overtly dark, but still very grim and kind of, almost for lack of a better word, realistic and very down to earth and even relatable to some people. I'm sure many people will find a song like this very relatable if they actually give it a chance and a listen. The next song, Come Together, not to be confused with the Beatles song of the same name, kind of continues on this theme of being in a very, very complicated, if not almost implicitly abusive and toxic relationship that the song Full kind of delved a bit into, albeit at a slightly more faster pace with its music, with its guitars, percussions, and bass kind of still having that kind of semi-80ish new ways kind of vibe to it. Damon here kind of sings about how he kind of realizes he's gone out of this relationship and now he wants to get back together with this person, while at the same time he's kind of blaming both himself and the other person. How this person has taken everything and now they've both revealed what they were, as if this kind of argument they were in, this fight they were in, kind of already exposed who they both are, and now they're trying to figure out a way to get out of it, trying to work out their problems, work out their differences, and hoping that things will go back to normal again. Even if that normal is still the same old bad stuff, or if the normal stuff was good and there's no way to go back to that. It does kind of show the futility that fragile relations like this can be. So in a way, when Damon asks, why can't we come together, it seems mostly out of irony or even sarcasm, as if to say, yeah, we treat each other so badly anyway, why don't we go back together and do the same old shtick over and over? And when he sings, I'd do anything for you, it's kind of ambiguous in that sense, as if anything includes both good and bad, as if he'll do anything regardless of how much morally or ethically questionable it may be. It goes to show how obsessive one could be to get back into a relationship, even as soon as they just got out of it, as if they're so full of regret that it somehow being in this relationship somehow benefits them in some way or another. Continuing the deconstructive themes of relationships, High Cool kind of also deals with the aftermaths of a kind of breakup, or at least a relationship in the brink of a breakup. Damon kind of sings about how this person he's with is so predictable and so routinic that whenever they come round, they talk too much about a whole lot of nothing. Damon says, don't think I expect you to, or that I need you to, or that I want you to, as if he's so used to this that it's all just kind of like predictable to him, that he just kind of sees it coming from foresight and whatnot. And when he says, "Is that all I give you?" he's kind of asking himself, is what I do, is what I provide not enough? Isn't expressing my thoughts and honest feelings to you not enough? And it's all these questions that he may never get an answer to, which I think kind of adds to the overall tragedy of most of the songs of the album. And music-wise, we really do get a bit of Alex James's little plucky bass, which I do really like and I do really appreciate. And it still carries on that kind of proto-Britpop sound that would soon eventually develop with the eventual Blur albums that would come after this. It's not exactly there yet, but you can tell that it is starting somewhere. It's not perfect, but is mostly raw. Not entirely clean and polished, but just overall raw, very, very, very raw song. And all in all, this when I think of the title High Cool, I think it's also another demonstration of the irony. He's kind of passing himself off as all high and mighty and cool, when deep down he knows he's just as much a jerk and just as much sour to everyone around him, just as bitter. Then we come to penultimate song of the album, simply called Birthday. And boy, is this not a song you'd probably want to play at an actual birthday. Unless the person who you're celebrating the birthday of happens to like gloomy, almost angsty kind of songs, who probably doesn't even like birthdays anyway. But anyways, the song starts off with a very slow yet very oddly distorted and filtered guitars of Graham Coxon, kind of playing this very, very not entirely this not entirely dark, depressing, but still somewhat melancholic kind of guitar rhythm and riff. And then Damon comes in singing about how it's his birthday and then no one's here today, life feels strange, and in each of these short verses it ends with the word day, like even if it seems kind of odd and out of place, like even though it says it's my birthday, no one here day, it feels strange day, out in the park day, walk outside day, it kind of feels odd but still very consistent and reoccurring. I guess it goes to show that poor literacy can work to its advantage. Especially with how it seems to convey that the idea of birthdays, celebrating annually about our births, the day we were born and whatnot, all seems kind of pointless. And how, in a way, it just feels like when you get right down to it, it just feels like any other day. There's nothing really different or big or significant about it. It's just a day that you happen to have been born in about a year or two or many years ago, depending on your age. And also, how do I put this? It kind of deconstructs birthdays as a whole, really. Not saying that they're bad, but just that they're not really all that special either, or the possibility that they're not all special. That they're just kind of the same old routines, and they're just there to make us feel better about ourselves, to make us feel at least one day of full-on happiness when the rest of the year has just been so much crappiness and hard work, and it's just nothing but misery and angst to us as a whole. And even then, it's really not all that much. Just one day against like 364 other days, it's kind of like there's no comparison. It's just one small day, and it's not really, probably won't make all that much of a difference. And as soon as, and when he says it makes me feel small, I think it kind of refers to how a birthday is literally just one day in a year of 365 or 6 days. One day just really feels small. And because such a day feels small, Damon himself feels small, or anyone else who may connect or relate to a song like this. And then as soon as Damon finishes rather smaller lyrics, even fewer than any of the previous songs so far, the rest of the music, the rest of the instruments and band members coming to culminate in a very beautiful and melodic climax of dour and grim music tones, and it all eventually calms down with Coxon's guitar kind of closing all out again. It's an almost depressing song, but it also kind of helps us realize things that we may not exactly find comfortable, but still try to find a little bit of light and hope in them as well. And so we come to the last song of Leisure, Wear Me Down. To me, this is kind of a culmination of a lot of the themes of the songs on the album. Particular being about relationships and breaking up and abuse and all that. How Damon feels like he's being bored by this person that he's been going back and forth with him in this on and off again relationship, and ultimately just deciding that he's kind of had enough and he just can't take it anymore and decides to just break it off altogether, thus bringing the album to a somewhat fitting close. how he can't fight anymore and his defenses are down, as if to say he's been so stressed to the point that he's kind of run out of options, and he just has no more excuses to go back to his relationship, and that all the effort is just ultimately not worth it. And when he says to forget at all, he just decides to just, well, forget about this person, just move on to someone else, or even just move on to another life without needing to be in any legit romance at all. As if there are more important things to life than being in a relationship you know is going to eventually break up anyway. It's a very bittersweet kind of ending song, especially with its distorted guitars and the off-tempo harmonic drums. It's ultimately a good send-off of the album, while also kind of being a bit of a foreshadow to what would come for the future of Blur. And as a whole, that's kind of how I would describe the album of Leisure. It feels more like a setup for future music rather than just one that stands on its own. It's not a bad album. There are a few songs there that I kind of found enjoyable. Sing in particular is probably my favourite personally. And something like There's No Other Way is definitely one of the more catchier ones. But I can tell why some people weren't exactly fond of it, even when it first came out, and even why the actual Blur members were kind of not so fond of it. It does feel like something of a slightly amateurish album. The best way, yeah, another album I would describe it to in terms of its aesthetic and its kind of production values would be Radiohead's own debut album, Pablo Honey. It's not both albums aren't perfect, but they at least kind of set the foundations of what kind of music the respective bands would kind of tackle into. So, if it weren't for something like this, we would never have something like Modern Life is Rubbish, or Park Life, or Song 2, and Gorillaz, and so on. It still has its place in history, so I think it kind of deserves a little bit of appreciation, if even a bit of a self-aware, ironic kind of appreciation. It's far from perfect. It does have its share of, well, not exactly flaws, but still nitpicks. A lot of the lyrics here are very, very minimalistic, though I could argue it kind of works to an advantage, as less is more. And some of the music can get grating at times to some people, and as a whole, one could easily call this teenage angst the soundtrack. But then again, as these Blur members were still very young by the dawn of the 90s, they would still have a bit of that angst from their teenage years. So it still kind of feels natural to them, even if looking back, it still feels like a product of the time. But it still feels like a decent enough product of its time. So if you're not familiar with this album, if you're a fan of David Albarn and Blur, I say give this one a chance. Just be aware of the very different kind of music you might expect from something like this. All in all, far from perfect, but a good enough first impression for Blur, and it's a good thing that they still managed to stick around even after 30-ish years, if not slightly earlier. Next time, September begins with a record. A world record. A new world record.
Humans, Earthmen, so pitiable, so willingly blissed in their ignorance, wasting away their short lives, creating materials only to spit on them, and afterwards they put them up on display and parade for all to see and laugh in glee. It drives me to insanity. It almost makes me question how when I was born, created, I was made in the perfect likeness of a certain man. Voice, face, almost as if I was born from a mere part of him. The Story Watcher himself. But each and every time, what few I do, I remind myself of my goal, my destiny set upon me by my Creator, my Master, the Mistress of the Void, the Princess of Shadows, of Darkness. I may not know what she sees in these pitiful life forms, but if my purpose is to be the better version, then so I shall be.